first interesting thing to me was when I looked back only a year ago, 12 months ago, March 2025, and this is what we were talking about at this forum. We were saying, what is AI? And it's crazy to think that a year ago, we were actually having to define for the audience what AI is. We didn't really know what AI was. And today, if I was to ask you, every single person in this room would be using it in one form or another. So that shows you the rate of adoption of AI. We also spoke a year ago about this hype cycle where we knew, and this happens whenever there's new technology, that you have a peak of inflated expectations followed by a trough of disillusionment. Now, I'm not sure where we are on that cycle now with AI. I suspect that we are still heading to the peak of hype or inflated expectations, but we can be sure that at some point we will hit this trough of disillusionment before getting to this plateau of productivity. And I think all of you will be experiencing that. What's happened, though, we're talking about a year ago where we were talking about definitions of AI, we're talking about the hype cycle. What's happened in the last 6 months is that the capability of AI models has accelerated, and it continues to accelerate as AI is used to build new AI models. And there are three forces that have aligned that make this possible. The first one is the enormous computing power that is now being produced via data centers, and et cetera, and in fact, chewing up enormous amounts of energy and electricity to the extent that some of these centers have to have their own power plants next door to power them. The next thing is the natural language tools, which means that instead of having to be a computer programmer to get information out of your system, you can now ask questions of Copilot, ChatGPT, or whatever your preferred large language model is. And in natural language, you can ask what would only have been possible a year or two ago programmatically. And the third part, which we're going to talk about today, is the availability of the data in your ERP system. And most of you today are either on Acumatica or moving on to Acumatica. The availability of the data in your core system has been, the availability has been enhanced so that your AI engines can actually access that data. I saw an interesting quote recently from Howard Marks, who's the CEO of Oaktree Capital Management, and it did make me think, because what he said was that AI can do a lot of things as well as or better than most people. It knows everything that's ever been written. It remembers, it can find it, it can cite it, it can link ideas and draw conclusions. It can identify the patterns in the past that led to success. That really encapsulates, I think, our fear as well as our hope of AI in our own businesses. And the question for us in our businesses is, are we using artificial intelligence to improve efficiency in our businesses? And is it any different to simply using human intelligence? Are we leveraging off what AI can do better than people? And that led me back to a definition of human intelligence. I have always said, as the CEO of this company, I surround myself with intelligent, competent people and give them the freedom to use their own initiative. Now, if I turn the clock back to about 2004, when I was essentially a one-man band and I was sitting in my office in Bondi Junction in Sydney, looking out the window and watched the excavation happening for the new Westfield Centre and watched the Westfield Centre being built one level at a time. In fact, they built one level every week, which was pretty remarkable then. But and that's where I got my knowledge of construction, by the way, was looking out of the window. But my first employee was an intelligent human called Anna. I'd run out of capacity. To do a lot of things and thought this is the way to grow my business. I could ask Anna a question and Anna would go away, find the data and come back to me with the data. So I could say, for example, to Anna, I could say, who are our top 10 clients? Anna would go away. She'd look in our system of record, our accounting system. She'd pull out some data if it was there, and she'd say, here are a list of your top 10 clients. I could say, how much did each spend? And Anna would do exactly the same. She would come back. I could say, who bought what? And even that, Anna could go and pull out the information and bring it back to me. But when I got to more complex questions, where I would say, who did not buy? So in other words, who bought A but didn't buy B when everybody else was buying A and B? That was a lot more complicated. and wasn't easy for a mere human to do. But if we look at Anna's process of what she as a human was going through, she would go collect the data, clean the data, prepare the data, do some initial data analysis, and then get into the numbers, and then she would give it to me. And data was the key, because without the data, neither Anna nor AI can provide the analysis required for interpretation and analysis. Anna would then give me the data, and my role as CEO, which would be very similar to your roles, is interpretation and insights based on the data. Now, if I wind the clock back a little bit further and I go to our user groups in 2023, give me a moment, it's there. In 2023, we were talking about analyzing data and we were talking about insights. We weren't talking about AI yet at that point. And we were explaining to you how important it is to have the data in your system of record or your single source of truth so that you could analyze it and you could get insights out of it to enhance the efficiency in your business. That led to me to think about what is the difference between the human intelligence, being Anna, and artificial intelligence, being Copilot. Am I just simply swapping one for another, or am I using the power of AI better than I would use the power of human intelligence? And I came up with a concept. The concept was not entirely original. When I started the business, we were selling Exonet. And Bruce Carr, who was one of the original shareholders of Exonet, said to me, when you go out to see a client, make sure you drive around the back and you see what car he is driving. If he's driving a bombed out old Holden, just keep driving and go back to your office. But if he's driving a Maserati, you go in and you sell hard. That was his proposition. So I then gave Anna a project. The concept was that many mid-market business owners will spend approximately the same amount on a new car as they will spend on a new ERP system. That came from Bruce Carr. If true, it has some impact on how we do things like marketing. We might choose a different marketing channel. We may choose to do a promotion with Mercedes-Benz. We may choose to advertise in a motoring magazine. But let's first see if the data, the facts, actually support this proposition. So, step one, analyze the data. So, Anna, how many of our existing CEOs drive a vehicle of approximately the same cost as they spend on acquiring their new ERP system? Now, as we know from the previous exercise, this means, first of all, the data must exist. You need to know where it is, and you need to have access to it. And those are the three prerequisites that we still have, whether it's Anna or artificial intelligence. So, first step, does the data exist? In this instance, does the data exist? Well, in actual fact, some of it exists. I know who my clients are. I probably don't know who the CEO is. I certainly don't know what car they drive. And I don't know what they paid for the car. But the data does exist somewhere. It doesn't exist in our system of record. I never chose to record the name of the CEO in my system of record. Easy enough, create an extra field. This is the CEO. I could have done that, had granular data, which would help me with my insights later on down the track, but I didn't do it. So what am I going to do now? Okay, where is the data? I can log into the ASIC data register. It's public domain. I can look up and I can see who the registered officers are for that particular business. So yes, that data exists, and is it available? Yeah, it actually is available. The next thing I would need to do is go to the motor vehicle registry and then try and map out the name against the vehicles that are registered against that person's name. Now, that's not in the public domain. So the data exists, but it's not accessible to me. And the third part is I need to know the sell price of the vehicle. Do I know that? Well, possibly I could get a price list somewhere and I could work that out. So in reality, before the days of AI, Anna went away, weeks, possibly months later, and came back. Did I have an answer to my question? No, I didn't have an answer to my question. Why didn't I have an answer to my question? Because either the data didn't exist or the data was not accessible to me. Wind the clock forward to where we are today, March 2026, and I asked the same question of Copilot, an AI engine. How many of the CEOs of my existing clients drive a Mercedes-Benz exceeding the cost of implementing their ERP system. And Copilot, when I pop it in there, Copilot essentially comes back to me and says, the data does exist, but I don't have access to it. So what I will do is I'll give you a spreadsheet that you can populate with the data. Not that that's of any help to me because I don't have the data, and I'll give you a note on ethics and privacy because some of this information is pretty sensitive. So the difference between Anna and the AI engine was not that pronounced without the data. However, if I had the data and I had access to the data, it would be incredibly pronounced because within seconds, the AI engine would have done that analysis, would have given it to me, and I could then interpret and take insights from it. And I think that there's a subtle difference between anticipating that AI will answer all your questions and understanding that your data is actually the secret sauce that gives it the ability to do that, which is why we now come to your ERP system and your Acumatica instance. So your ERP collects data. The AI transforms it. The AI can read the data. It can spot patterns. It can predict trends, and it can automate tasks. So it's really, really important that you keep the data in your system as clean as possible, and don't be scared to have granular data. So if you think that in the future it would help you, the additional cost of one field and capturing more information is minimal compared to having to get to a point where you want to postulate a theory and you're not able to extract the data for that. The other thing that's happening, and I'd recently come back from the Acumatica Summit in Seattle, where they're starting to talk not of a system of record, your ERP system, or single source of truth. They're starting to talk of a system of intelligence. And I think that's an interesting shift that we need to embrace as ERP users, as users of Acumatica, to understand that we are now working with a system of intelligence that will simply get more and more intelligent as AI evolves. And then finally, Grant, I'm going to finish off with this quote from Julie Harrison. And my dad joke for the day is, I don't know who Julie Harrison is, but thank you, Julie Harrison. I liked your quote. Technology is always at its strongest when we use it as a tool, not as a crutch. And just because AI represents the fastest processing of information ever enjoyed by humans, that doesn't mean people stop being wise and discerning and bring judgment to a problem. So, Grant, that's my introduction. That's it from me. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And